name's Jack Langworthy. I'm the founder and CEO of Ninayo. I'm not sure if many of you use my product. Are there any Tanzanian smallholder farmers in the... Okay, Swedish software engineer. Sorry, I just got that memo. A little bit about my background. I moved to Tanzania in 2009 and became obsessed with African agriculture. I saw it as this big, inefficient marketplace where lots of people were suffering as a result of it. There was also lots of opportunity. Skipping ahead a few years, I was working as a business analyst in a town called Älmhult, Sweden, working at IKEA headquarters. I had this really good job, but I was still sort of obsessed with African agriculture. And I read Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 and sort of thought about software as a solution. And from there, I talked to Trend 37 a little bit and got Ninayo launched, got a bit of traction in Tanzania with a few thousand users. So I quit the job. I went down, interviewed the farmers who were using Ninayo to get a sense of like how this was impacting their lives, user interviews to adjust, things like that. And then I went to Silicon Beach, Silicon Valley to fundraise, and it's been easy street ever since then. Nobody wants to invest in your pre-revenue African startup. Tip. I spent all my savings out there trying to get this thing going, applied to every VC on the Sandhill Road, that whole route, and came back to Scandinavia broke, without a career, feeling pretty down like a failure. And my mom actually, she called me saying she'd almost missed a phone call from the chairman and co-founder of Uber who wanted to see me, this guy Garrett Camp, who wanted to interview me on Tuesday. I think this was like a Thursday. So I flew, borrowed some money from my parents, flew back to San Francisco, went to the nicest office I'd ever set foot in, got grilled by the smartest people I'd ever spoke to, and I got a nice investment in the company at a good valuation. And I think that's why I've been invited here today, is it's that kind of classical story of the startup founder archetype. Let me sort of get into how building for the globe has worked for Ninayo and the opportunities there, and how it can apply to you guys. So the agenda for my presentation today is going to start with tech being magic. Kind of cheesy, but I've seen how this can change cultures in East Africa for the better. And it really is kind of wizardry what we've created in the world of tech. So I'm going to give some examples that give a bit of context about East Africa, frankly Tanzania. I'm going to leave it to you guys to extrapolate my story from Tanzania to, whether it's Thailand or Honduras or wherever it is you're thinking about building for the globe. Some more exotic like Denmark. And then we'll talk about Ninayo because specificity is the soul of narrative. I'm an expert in Ninayo and not much else, but I think it is a good framework for how you can approach the market and how to think about getting your product traction, funded, these sorts of things. Then we'll do hogwash. I don't know the good Swedish translation for hogwash. I was titled bullshit, and my dad said that the U.S. has a coarse enough image in the world right now, so translate hogwash however you want to. But that's going to be looking at governments, which are often, well-intended but kind of corrupt, and NGOs, which are often, pretty much always well-intended and very usually inept. So this is a part of international development. It's part of building for the globe. Then we'll look at what you might do. I think there's sectors that are sort of hot right now for development that you could transfer your skills into, and we'll talk about a way to think about getting involved there. All of that will take about 40 minutes, I expect. I might talk really fast and do it in 2 minutes. We'll see. And then we'll do Q&A, and I welcome all questions and doubt I can answer many of them. But let's get started. So, like I said, in 2009, I moved to Tanzania as a Peace Corps volunteer, where I'd done this 27-month commitment to living in a hut as a math and physics teacher. And there was no toilet. I'd collect rainwater and filter it for drinking. There was 3 hours of power per day because I was at a secondary school. And I'd use that time to go on Facebook and watch all my friends back in LA having like the time of their lives at Coachella and stuff, and think like, I have made a huge mistake. This is a rough way to spend my 20s with all these fast-speaking Swahili speakers and a lot of goats and chickens and not much else going on. But I'm really grateful I sort of stuck with it, and after a while integrated into the culture, learned the language, Kidogo, a little bit, and was able to avail myself to opportunities that I would have never had otherwise, one of which was working with the Mangati Mangati clan. They're known as the fiercest clan of the Maasai tribe. And us Westerners really adore them and sort of romanticize. You know, when you go out into the bush in Tanzania, you're hoping to take a selfie with a Maasai and like update your Facebook profile with it. That's a very touristy thing to do. It's because if you look at it, they wear the local shukas, those plaid blankets, like wearing a blanket and looking like a badass that takes that takes a certain style. The girls you can see have these cultural or these tribal scars on their face. It's a really rich and independent culture. And let me give you a little context for how that got, or for why I call them independent, so to speak. Because when Tanzania took its independence from the UK in 1961, the founder of the country, Julius Nyerere, he'd gotten some false information from Chairman Mao's China and the success of central planning, and so he moved all of the 120 tribes of the country into new villages. They'd been in their villages for centuries, and then it's like, nope, we're gonna mix you so that you're not Wabena and Wahehe tribes. You're all Watanzania. We're all going to be united, and there was a real need for unification. And in the process, compliance was mostly peaceful. You know, people wanted to break the tribalism and work together. That's everybody except for the Maasai, who are nomadic. They never really farmed. They'd eat the fruits of the forest, and they're big shepherds where they'll drink the cow's milk and the blood of the cows in ceremonies. And they have this sort of unique, independent lifestyle that that's fascinating, but it also makes them really bad neighbors. Most people in Tanzania farm for a living, and I think cows are like Bitcoin in the sense that it's a great place to store your value. Like you've got this crazy inflating fiat currency, and if you put it into a cow, it's going to grow it's a good place to store your value unless you live near the Mangati, because the Mangati believe every cow in the world is a Mangati cow. Political problems that I think Sweden suffers from too. So I'm working on this farm with the Mangati. I think they're really cool. I'm excited about this opportunity. The thing is the Mangati never wanted to go to school. That's why these children were working. Their culture never had interest in literacy, mathematics, things like that. They're shepherds, they're nomads. And so the kids they have to sign in at the beginning and the end of the day, but they cannot construct numbers, or letters. They just make their mark. And like, cool, I don't judge, that's fine. But what blew my mind was that then they're just texting all day. And I was thinking like, what are you texting? Like, letters? I think the Mangati invented emojis. That is my theory. It was like 2010, and I say tech is magic because this is a culture that Shakespeare and literature never really incentivized them to want to learn to read. But then these Harry Potter level devices that send messages to their mama up in Kilimanjaro that allow them to coordinate and to send money through the space, through radio waves. Like the spirit of what's in this room here, the technological spirit that you're all a part of is truly magical. And like, it's amazing how we can bring people together, and how when we launch in these places that don't have the same infrastructure that, say, Sweden has, they're going to innovate in their own ways as well. So that's my little spiel on tech is magic. I think it's quite an honor to be speaking in front of you software engineers. You're wizards. Let me jump into a case study on Ninayo. Ninayo is an online trading platform for African agriculture. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how we think about the market. First of all, if you're going to launch your product, you want to think in terms of a very large market, especially if you're pitching to VCs. They want to know that 9 out of 10 your company's going to fail, but if it wins, it better be like a multi-billion-dollar market so that they can make their investing strategy work. So when you look at the sub-Saharan African agriculture market, you find 250 million people work directly in agriculture for a living, and that they have a problem. A third of crops are going to waste across these regions. And that's a lot of waste when you consider that this is a $500 billion sector. But one thing is ubiquitous across the countries where we have this rapidly expanding telecom infrastructure. So the groundwork is being laid for innovation across sub-Saharan Africa. Quick aside, I hate the term sub-Saharan Africa. It would be great if we can never use it again. It's not really even a shorthand for anything. Sub-Saharan Africa, it's incredibly long. And I mean, Mali is not the same as Kenya or South Africa or Congo. All these markets are independent. You need to look at them individually. So that being said, sub-Saharan Africa is my pet peeve, but I need to show it's a big market. So drilling into an accessible market, we look at the problem in Tanzania, where it's, again, a large sector, a $12 billion agriculture sector, and 3/4 of the population work directly in agriculture. That equals about 10 million farms, because there's about 55 million Tanzanians, and 1/4 of the GDP of the country. But they have a big problem because there is this $4 billion loss in the sector every year. $4 billion, it's not some vague macroeconomic term. The average Tanzanian earns about $1,000 per year, and this is $4 billion that's not going to that sector because of waste in the agricultural space. So 30, 40, 50% of food goes to waste depending on crop type. And all this happens while malnutrition rates are about 30%. So it's insane to me that you have enough food produced and you have malnutrition. Clearly, the left hand of supply can't coordinate with the right of demand. Something is broken in this system around the communication because demand is there and people are suffering and supply is bountiful. So let me delve into a little bit about why that might be the case. Traditionally, a smallholder farmer lives in a remote area, not near, he's got a farm, so he's not in the center of town. And he grows his maize, for instance, and waits for a middleman to come through and offer him a price for his crops. You might say, Jack, I'll give you $100 per bag of maize. Great, that's a good deal. Then the guy sends a truck a few weeks later, and now the moisture's getting into my maize, the bugs, the elements are starting to jeopardize my product. And the middleman knows this, so he'll say, Jack, now the price is $40 per bag. And you're kind of left with no options because you've got a ton of maize, the infrastructure's terrible, renting a truck is bad. That middleman has all the negotiating power. And so the farmer will sort of offload or maybe say, no, I'm going to try and find something else. A percentage of the food goes to waste. And then the maize is stuck in this really inefficient patchwork of middlemen. There's 5 to 8 trades between the farmer and the consumer. And each middleman is taking his cut, losing a percentage of crops. And that's why you have this really inefficient supply chain that's keeping people in a cycle of poverty and malnourishment. But good news, there's a change happening. Sorry. So we've created the solution of an online trading platform. This was a direct response to the needs I had when I was working in this sector, buying and selling crops on behalf of hundreds of farmers and selling them to markets. Was the coordination of picking up this crops was really inefficient. A sort of fat supply chain. It was certainly not a lean supply chain. Costs are very high in sending trucks to these remote villages. And then once I had everything in place, finding a buyer was difficult. So what we've done in Tanzania is we've created this simple process where you post your harvest and then you receive offers. The buyers can search in this database and it's a cost saver for the buyers, as I said, because they don't have to go to each remote village. They can start dialing and SMSing and messaging and coordinate amongst themselves. But what happens then is that the farmers are not just focused on one or two villages, but they're competing against one another. So prices are driven up for the farmers. So in general, it increases incomes by increasing competition for the farmers' products and getting those products more affordably to the marketplace. Yeah. And like to date now, we have about 25,000 people, a little over, who are registered Ninayo users. And the product is pretty basic. I know this is a very design-oriented room, and it might not look so beautiful to you, but we've designed it for the Tanzanian market with the constraints in low IT literacy and running Opera Mini, not being able to use JavaScript, and let me explain some of the design choices that are made here. Like obviously the landing page is very simple. They're sort of, oh, by the way, it'll come up in Swahili, not in English, and most people aren't using an iPhone 4, they're using an Android Technophone. But the landing page is simple. You basically can log in, you can post an ad, or you can search the prices. And if you were to post an ad, it's very simple. You choose I'm a buyer or I'm a seller. You select the crop type, the dimensions of crop type, price, volume, and location. And then it'll be populated in this searchable database where a buyer can say like, okay, I'm looking for 100 tons of maize in the Iringa region at this price, and then sort through from there. So we're not reinventing the online trading platform. If you think about things like Etsy, I think they have a multi-million dollar industry on macrame alone, like those, you weave those things and hang it on a wall, because they're connecting supply and demand more efficiently. And if Etsy can make a multi-million dollar industry out of macrame, food in Africa has a chance. One thing people don't quite understand, well actually Martin illustrated this pretty well right beforehand, but the internet is rapidly becoming more accessible in Tanzania and in Africa. And you see it rising year on year. Right now there's 22 million internet subscribers in Tanzania. I don't think there's 22 million Scandinavians. I'm not sure. It's like 5 million in Norway, 5 in Denmark, 9 here. So more than the entire region of Scandinavia is already online in Tanzania. And it's true, most of them are using the internet on a mobile device. In fact, almost all of them, according to this study, which is why we build everything for a smartphone. Because yes, desktops were never in the average home or hut, but cell phones and smartphones have been made incredibly affordable through companies like Techno. And right now you have about 40 million mobile subscribers. Unfortunately, most internet subscribers are in urban areas. So, I mean, I had this genius idea for an online trading platform, but unfortunately most of my users are in rural areas. So we had to adapt and make it a USSD SMS system as well that'll help populate the website. I was being ironic when I said genius. I hope that was clear. So let's talk about the human impact of what it means to build an online trading platform in this sector. You have examples like Maria Lupagaro. She's a smallholder farmer in Tanzania. Never used the internet before. Met one of the Peace Corps agents who helped her post her coffee beans onto the website. And by being listed on Ninayo, she was able to find a buyer who gave her an additional 12% on the previous price. She sold 20 bags. It's roughly an extra $240 that Maria earned, right? She did that on her own. There was no charity, and the money she earned, she can use to buy mosquito nets, to send her daughter to school, or if she wants to invest in agricultural inputs for next year. She knows what's best for her, and she did this on her own. And like, to me, that's what international development is about. It's about creating products that create creators, that create value for users. I'm a capitalist. And then you have examples like Juditha Herrera. I think she's the most extreme example, where Juditha is a second wife. That doesn't mean her husband he did remarry, but many times. So she works on the farm, the coffee farm of the first wife, and she only has this small onion patch with which to raise her own children. But by using Ninayo, she was able to double the price of her onions because she was connecting much further up the supply chain, right? Like I said, there's 5 to 8 trades between like the farmer and the market, and prices are incredibly volatile. So even I have doubled the price of crops just messing around with about $1,000 worth a few years ago. It's a massively inefficient sector, but when you bring price transparency and this coordination, it can change lives. So yay for Juditha. Again, she gets to do what she wants with that money. Well, I hope. I don't quite know her situation, but that's empowerment. That's what we're here to do, is to help people by making awesome products. Hogwash time. Like this picture to me, it's heartbreaking. You really see sort of like the tragedy of this poor man suffering in front of these empty crates. And it reminds me of like the ads I used to see as a kid for like, $1 a month and you can feed a child, and it would show you these injured poor children. And it made me never want to go to Africa. And a lot of that is a bunch of hogwash. I took this picture. The guy is fine. He sold all his goods. He's resting. Don't worry about him. He's good, right? When you're in the international development space, there's a whole lot of like, I don't know whether it's like moral preening, virtue signaling. It's very donor dependent. We need to pull at your heartstrings. We need to make you sort of sympathize. I kind of think we condescend to Africans or whatever group that needs our help, like that they need our help would be the main problem there. But you're dealing in this industry where billions of dollars go to countries that have GDPs of $50 billion. The countries are less dependent on their people as a tax base as they are like the UN or the World Bank, USAID. This is what's sort of throwing off the natural economics of a lot of emerging markets. I mean, we've been doing this for 50 years now. It's not like there's a earthquake or a crisis. It's that they're dependent on our foreign aid, and we don't always employ it with the greatest amount of wisdom. So let me give you an example that really sticks out to me. When I drive from Dar es Salaam to our office in Iringa, it's like 10 hours into the bush from Dar es Salaam. And about an hour before I get there, in the middle of nowhere, I see this tribute to an effort that the US government did with some partners to help farmers in Iringa. One of probably like the 10,000th time they've tried to help farmers with free stuff. And they said to this farmer group, like, you guys should be planting tomatoes. Farmer said, okay, why? Well, we'll give you the tomato seeds, right? So your cost of inputs is virtually zero. It's just opportunity cost. And the farmers said, like, okay, but are you going to get us a market for these? Yeah. The US government will get you a market. And I know how these projects work. There's a lot of Westerners and SUVs who make, $100,000 a year, pay no taxes, get a lot of holidays. Very smart. It's good to attract talent. I have no problem paying to attract talent, really. But they also get into this group think mode of like, all right, we need to build a market for these tomatoes. And so what do? Is they build this marketplace, which is in the middle of nowhere. They laid down cement, They built a shopping center, essentially, for tomatoes where nobody lives. Probably cost $1 million. I don't really know the details, but I'm sure if you add it all up, it just shows how this aid, this development can be very corrosive and screw up the natural economics. Why not let the farmers decide, make a deal, say I want to grow maize, something that's less perishable. The farmers are left with rotten tomatoes, essentially, because there wasn't a factory to sell to. There wasn't a consumer. So I am bashing on NGOs. I'm going to leave it at that because I work with a lot of these people. But some good has come from it as well because it's very hard to do business in these markets. So if you're talking about the governments that you're going to have to deal with when you're building for the globe, not kick-ass Sweden, you come from a great country in terms of the index for ease of doing business, more or less always top 10. It's very easy to set up a business. It's straightforward, honest. And when you're in emerging markets, you're going to want to check the World Bank's list for ease of doing business. The red countries are obviously the harder ones to do it in. Like, I guess, if you're looking at Africa, you see the DRC and Congo to the right of that yellow one, which is Kenya. Kenya has higher IT literacy, better trade. It's not a bad place to do business. It's not Sweden, but it's not bad. And then below is Tanzania, which is very rough. I have nothing bad to say about the Tanzanian government. But it is a challenge to set up a business importing things that could take 3 hours in the UK or Sweden. It'll take a week to get through the ports there. There are challenges to working in these places. And you're definitely, if you're building a product for the globe, I'm going to take for the globe as not Sweden, not your own market, local partners are essential. Do some outside-in research on how to set up a business there and how to get traction. Okay, so let's jump into, now that I've warned you and scared you off of doing business around the globe, some advice based on the lessons that I've had as building a product for Tanzania. The woman in the picture has a backpack on her head, and the straps are not a feature, they're a bug. I buy backpacks for straps. Like, I like putting a backpack on my back, and it's somewhat shocking to me to see somebody, like, this is a great symbol of the different perception of things that a culture on the other side of the world might have from your own. I mean, this woman, like many Tanzanian villagers, is probably used to filling up her 20-liter bucket at the river, putting a little cushion on her head, and then walking for miles with it on her head. And it's natural. It's easy. I can't do it, but like millions of people do it. So bear in mind that there are no universal standards for design, essentially. Like I was mentioning earlier when I was showing you the landing page and the basic registration pages on Ninayo, it took us a good amount of time to realize that shorthands like a home button or a back button were nonsensical to people who are using the internet for the first time. And the only way we could learn that was through testing and iteration, right? I'm sure most of you recognize this as like a Google Analytics behavior flow, but let data guide what you're doing. This test and iterate was sort of drilled into my head when I was at Expo Labs. I think the reason Garrett Camp and Travis Kalanick were able to sort of win the rideshare contest back in 2008, or, there were more competitors besides Uber. They weren't the first ones there, but they just had experience building multi-million-dollar businesses, and the way they did it was by looking at user behavior flow, A/B testing, adjusting, letting the data inform what's putting people, through the system to where you want them to go and be repeat users. So the way we learned to eliminate symbols in shorthand and have those explicit buttons was just by A/B testing various pages. So you want to let the data inform your decisions. Pretty straightforward, I suppose. That being said, it's also important that you do user tests because, well, for a few reasons. One, Google Analytics is not going to pick up every interaction with the website. I believe it's because most phones run Opera Mini, and it's not necessarily picked up on Google Analytics. But as you're running user tests, you need to calibrate the results with the local culture in mind. Tanzania is a very polite culture. Nobody wants to insult you or be rude. And when you're searching for product feedback, you want to be insulted. You want people to tell you how crummy your product is, right? And this can be a challenge where we'd interview, 10 farmers and 10 buyers, and they'd be saying like, Ninayo is the best. I love it. I use it all the time. I'd be like, okay, show us how you use it. I don't know how to open my web browser. Like it would be there is a disparity that you should, calibrate the results with, because it can be so humbling is the word, humbling to do a user test because, like I said, I invented this genius application, and the users are doing it wrong. Diversify your team. I think it's pretty easy to get tired of the word diversity. It can be like over applied to situations where it's at like the expense of talent or something along those lines. But when you're building for the globe, the less Swedes on your team, the better. You want to have host country nationals. They have knowledge you don't have. They have ideas about the emotional context and the historical challenges that your product is going to be facing. Like with Ninayo, excuse me, with Ninayo, farmers have been burned for decades by these, frankly, like white people coming to help get them out of the cycle of poverty, and we've been called like the Antichrist. And having local staff there who are able to bridge that gap is really important. So, yes, diversify your team. The more locals that you engage, the better. And it's working with our staff in Tanzania has been like the biggest joy of this, I'm going to say, because people are eager to like help their communities. They take great pride in getting work. You're going to find a lot of young people who are smarter than you, who are eager to make things happen. So by diversifying your team with the host country nationals, you're going to love it, and it's going to make you much more successful. Oh, you'll also get incredibly frustrated too by it, actually. If I'm being honest, nobody shows up to work on time. It's just a cultural thing. On my door, I say like 9 a.m. is 9 a.m. And it's like they can't read that. Okay. Recognize the limits of accessibility. So what do I mean here? Well, first off, the limits of accessibility can include things like we built an online trading platform for agriculture, but many people can't access the internet. They may have smartphones, but not quite know how to open Internet Explorer, whatever browser they have, or they don't own the smartphone, their neighbor does. And so it's important to recognize, like, okay, is there a big enough population or a segment who can access my website? Or do I need to sort of pivot into USSD, SMS trees, things that are more accessible? And another example of this, in Tanzania, I think there's about a 33% rate of illiteracy, and that's even more prevalent in the rural areas. So we had a sort of big consideration about should we try and design this for like the Mangati, or those who are illiterate, just through a series of symbols, and maybe we can just have like maize picture, avocado picture, and like a sales symbol. And we decided no, like that's sort of a whole another set of hoops we're putting ourselves through on an already difficult mission. And I think there should be advantages to literacy, and we have to sort of narrow our segment a little bit more. But I'm happy to, like the benefits that Ninayo can bring somebody in terms of earning more money will inspire more people to become literate. Like that's cool, that's good. Finally, the fun part, get your hands dirty. You need skin in the game. Do whatever it takes to become your own user. I don't care if you're making like a app for bartenders in Thailand or something. You need to go 10 bar in Thailand and use your app. Or like in our instance, you need to buy and sell the crops. We actually waited a fairly long time to get into this, and it was a big eye opener to like maybe some of the reasons my website was less genius than I'd initially thought. Like there was all sorts of challenges in the searching and the functions, and getting a sense of the actual risk of buying crops. Not that I hadn't done it before, but through my own system, that's just essential. So become your own user. So recapping this, first off, be aware that there's no universal standards. Backpack straps can be a bug, not a feature. Test and iterate, let the data guide your decisions. But when you're doing user tests, calibrate with the culture in mind. Diversify your team, get that local knowledge, and do whatever it takes so that you have skin in the game with your own product, you're using it, and you know the challenges personally. All right. So I skipped one, but recognize the limits of accessibility. Do you guys want to take another picture of the screen now with that? Okay. All right, we're in the home stretch. So let's talk about what you might do. These are some of the sectors that I think are hot right now in international development. They're kind of, the big one is fintech. I'm sure most of you are familiar with M-Pesa, but M-Pesa was, it's mobile money, and it was derived from from Kenya as a way to text money across the country. And the telecoms became bigger than the banks as a result of this. Like it has totally disrupted the financial service sector in a region where most people are unbanked. Now they can keep it on their cell phone. So like when I was first raising for Ninayo, I'd get my foot in the door at all sorts of VCs, and they'd say, "Are you fintech?" And I'd say, "No, we're a little more e-commerce. Goodbye, we want fintech." So this is a place where lots of people are trying to put in money. Let me build on that a little bit more. I think that, so it's been over a decade that millions of people have been used to electronic currencies, and they're suffering from the worst fiat currencies in the world, too. So I don't understand why the Blockchain Foundation is not like setting up shop in Zimbabwe right now. I mean, that's the classic example that Martin brought up, where you have these $100 trillion notes. They sell for about $5 now because they're like a collector's item, but they're worth absolutely nothing. And what's happened is the Zimbabweans have become very innovative about places to put their money. They'll use the yen, they'll use the dollar, but there's all these new services coming out built around like WhatsApp groups and stuff. And to me, it's a very fascinating part of the world right now that could be the tipping point for something like a blockchain currency that's actually based on a government. I'm going to add to this in January. Me and some crypto nerds are going to go out to Zimbabwe. If you're at all interested in like joining on this adventure, feel free to hit me up. I'll put my Twitter up there at the end of this presentation. So fintech, very exciting. Food security, I've probably talked you to death about that right now, but farming is the biggest, most prevalent job in the entire world. So anything you can do around there is a good thing. People eat every day, and most people survive on it for a living. Youth empowerment, the median age in most African countries is well below 20, and there's not a lot of job opportunities in this space. So I think of things like, with a very low entry barrier to labor, like Uber is a great one. But things like TaskRabbit, where you're able to let freelancers connect their drive to work with the markets at good prices, that's a huge thing. I remember in Cape Town earlier this year, I obviously talked to every Uber driver a lot, and I was talking. Well, most Uber drivers were Burundian refugees who, by virtue of being Burundian in South Africa, nobody wanted to hire them. They've got their own sort of tribal challenges. Except Uber doesn't care if you're a Burundian. They care that you have a driver's license. And this guy would drive and then take computer classes. To me, it's like the most middle-class, empowering thing in the world. And it's just the beginning of sort of the sharing economy, which can do wonders once we get that going in emerging markets. Gender empowerment. Most of these countries are very patriarchal, and there's a huge amount of waste in terms of creative power, in that women are the first ones to be pulled out of school. If you've got a boy and a girl and can keep one, you're going to keep the boy. And that's a travesty, and it's a total waste. So if you can unlock women's groups or that potential, you're going to be sitting on a gold mine. Looking at housing, more and more people move from the villages into the cities and then into slums because I think Dar es Salaam is like the third fastest growing city in the world right now, and it doesn't have the infrastructure there. So if you can do something along the lines of like house sharing, Airbnb, apartment apps, incentivize people to build more in these spaces, you're going to be doing a lot of good. And what's that Will Rogers saying, like God ain't making any more land or something like that. Like if we can build houses and build good, clean homes for people, that's going to be a big win. IKEA should just move to Tanzania. Logistics. The biggest cost in food is the cost of getting it from the farm to the to the city centers. And I know in Tanzania and much of Africa, trucks will go from the ports in Dar out to Zimbabwe and Zambia, Malawi, and they're coming back empty because I guess the cost structure makes it inefficient for them to load up in sort of western Tanzania because they don't have that infrastructure in place to easily load pallets and get it on there. It's actually more effective to just drive back empty. It's a huge waste, right? That's just incredible. They've got all these farmers trying to get their crops to markets in Dar es Salaam. And so logistics are probably going to be the first trillion-dollar business, if not Amazon. But whoever can crack sort of shipping, logistics, I mean, that's huge. The medical space is obviously a big one. I know there's a company that just launched in TZ called Zipline, where they're using drones to give blood supply or blood donations around the country because the roads are so terrible. I mean, obviously medical issues are a big challenge, and sexual health as well. We have high HIV rates. Homosexuals can be jailed or murdered in a lot of these countries. Like anything you can do to sort of to bring some empathy and knowledge about this sort of thing would be a big win, you know. But be careful doing a free speech forum, actually, in a country that's not yours. And the ways you could approach this are fairly, like, start with what your area of expertise is. A lot of people will go to, like, Tanzania and be like, I'm going to build a school, I'm going to lay bricks. And, like, they don't need you to do that. Your skill set is what's brought you to this room today. You're software engineers. If you have an expertise in fintech or logistics, whatever it is, really see how you can apply that to these new markets. I would recommend, if you're building for the globe, you consider, do I really want to live there? Because you're really going to live there. Like, I set up a company 11 time zones away from San Francisco. It's difficult, but I love Tanzania, and it was a very rewarding choice in the end. But, you know, you might rethink, I don't know, setting up the Ninayo for Chile, because it's going to be hard in Stockholm, right? It presents a lot of challenges. And then think about where you can have the biggest impact. Maybe the fintech market is a little saturated, and you're going to want to make it specialized for gender empowerment, like a girls-focused effort. Something like that. So that's sort of the approach I would use as you consider how you want to build for the globe, which I truly hope you do. And once you get sort of, like, obviously you first need to build an MVP, bootstrap it, friends and family, get some traction. And when you do have more than just an idea, something that's working where you can point to a few lessons, people are hungry to fund it. There is a lot of capital that is trying to reach emerging markets because that bottom of the pyramid is huge, right? So kind of on the right here, I hope you'll focus on the private sector. The top row from EXPA over to CETA are all the companies that we've partnered with along the way. But kind of in the bottom right here is pictures of Nordic VCs, as far as I can tell. And then on the left, I mean, truly, things like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, very hard to get a grant from them, but they have more money than they know what to do with, right? So there are ways that you can ease your entrance into these countries and capitalize your company for zero equity, basically. So yeah, if y'all do get started along the way, if you do build a product, like, I would love to give any advice or guidance that I can give you. Thank you so much for your attention. Tak, asante sana. You can follow me on Twitter. My Instagram is awesome. My Twitter is obnoxious. But karibu, welcome. If y'all have any questions, just let me know. Thanks. Aww. there's a gentleman over here. Oh, that's a great question. So we asked, what are my plans for upcoming features for Ninayo? We have this unique data that's been collected in a space that's very murky, so to speak. Like, people don't know what Maze is trading for. You can kind of Google the price, but it's not accurate. I can tell you who traded to whom at what price, and we're working with a sector that's largely unbanked, and so there's a huge opportunity to sort of build credit scores and help get loans for buyers as well as for farmers. There are risks that come with lending to sustenance farmers, though, where actually I'm against it because I don't think your farm, if that's all you own, should be put up for collateral. But there are ways to innovate around financial technology. So that's the big one coming up. Yeah. So I think in 5 to 7 years we'll acquire the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Um, so I, if I can drill into that just a little bit more, with smallholder farmers, it's a little. There are so many challenges to getting it into a futures market. Um, like, uh, and one of those is. So right now, the government might say the price of maize is 400 per kilo. And I've been in this situation where I'd bought some farmers' crops and I was selling it on their behalf, and they said, Jack, go get me that 400 per kilo. Well, the fact of the matter is, nobody's willing to pay me 400 per kilo. The government's just saying that because it's an election year and they want to be popular. It's not like the government's going to give you that money. They don't have any money. And so this misinformation is essentially what these efforts to become like a futures market has often led to, and why Ninayo is about connecting live buyers and live sellers. The price is what you can negotiate for it. And I know that's sort of untraditional, or it's not really the Western model, but it's the most practical one with this market. Great. How about you in the front, and then I saw you back there, and then you. I can hear you. I'll repeat the question. I can hear you fine. Yeah, so she was saying trust is a big issue, and when we get it out to people, is it heavy marketing or is it word of mouth? It starts when you're building a two-sided trading platform with very heavy marketing, right? You need the right amount of drivers and riders, or of crop producers and buyers, and so we're sort of artificially propping up the market by just saying, like, please post what you've got, and it's been heavy on the marketing, and then you sort of reach a tipping point where word of mouth is accelerating the growth more than your advertising is. And then this gentleman back here. Yes, I do have my hands full. Like, I definitely have my hands full. Kenya is the next practical one to go to. It's Swahili. It's even more advanced. I'm sure it's going to have its own challenges. We were hoping to launch in early 2018, but we haven't saturated the Tanzanian market nearly as much as I would have liked at this point. So it looks like we're going to delay that a little bit. But Uganda, Malawi, there are, in the agricultural and tech sector that we work, there's a lot of similarities. So we'll be expanding. Yes, actually, this gentleman I saw. Yeah, so how have we tackled the illiteracy on the website? We didn't tackle it. We use Swahili. Um, Oftentimes we use bad Swahili, I hear. And so we try and, because there's so many tribal dialects and stuff, people in the north say that's baloney, and then people in the south say that's stupid too. In fact, if you look at this bumper sticker, I printed 5,000 of these. This says Ninayo.com, smart farmers grow crops, or grow money, grow money. And it's Huzorisha. Down south, they mix up their R's and the L's. That's supposed to be an L, so I've just got 5,000 bumper stickers with a typo. So it's really hard. There's a lot of challenges around this. And then right here, I think I have maybe a minute or two left, so maybe 2 questions. Yeah, where do we make money? That's the worst question. Um, it's right now we're buying and trading crops on the website. Being the user, we have historical data on prices. We can buy coffee and then flip it fairly quickly down the road. And obviously, it's a chance for us to brand too. Like, we don't want to squeeze a farmer. We want them to be like, I love Ninayo. They just gave me good money. And I tell you, the margins in this sector are huge. Like, it's you can double your income if you do it right. So that is what we're doing now. We would like to integrate mobile pay we're partnered with Tigo Pesa to do so, but it's not as simple as just plug and play like PayPal was for eBay. People do want to check the product. They don't have UPS. All right, I think one more question. Way in the back. And how do we deal with hosting in Africa? We use Amazon. What's it called? AWS. All right. I saw you raise your hand, and I think I have time. Oh. Okay, so say you have a great idea. Where do you start to do it in Africa? Yeah, this is the question. I went to business school, and all I learned there was thrown out the window because I like Field of Dreams. If you've seen this movie about Kevin Costner playing baseball with ghosts, he says, like, if you build it, they will come. That is not what they teach you in business school, but I just really believe that you need to get that minimal viable product out there, start testing and iterating. Like, don't overthink it. Don't hide your idea. I used to sort of be like, oh my God, I have the greatest idea in the world. I can't tell anybody. Tell everybody. Let them kick the crap out of it. Like, it's important. Nobody's going to steal your idea for an app in Africa, too, by the way. Like, ideas are cheap. Okay, thank you guys very much. I really appreciated your listening.